Hello lovely knitters, I'm Merion from Love Crafts. We've had so many questions from our knitters about how to fix common mistakes. So here's a little video to help you learn how to fix them. Let's get started. I'm going to show you how to tink. Tink is knit backwards, and so if you've made a mistake early on in a row, it's a really good way to go back and fix it. Right, so here we are. Here's our bit of knitting as a little piece of stocking stitch, and you can see on the front of the stocking stitch the knit rows, these are the little V's here, and on the back of stocking stitch these are your little purl bumps. So I've now realised that this little bobble here should actually be a knit stitch and it's a purl. I've got a couple like that, but instead of taking the whole row back just to fix one, we're going to unknit these stitches. Now, to unknit a stitch, we're basically going to take it back onto the right hand needle from the stitch below. And so I'm going to show you on this second stitch because it's a bit easier. When you're going to put your needle into the stitch below, this is where you do it, just there in the stitch below. So on this first stitch here, I'm going to pop my needle underneath, and can you see the stitch below is just here. I'm going to take this stitch, slide it onto the left hand needle, the right hand needle, sorry, and just pull this yarn out. So I've taken the first stitch out, I've unknitted the first stitch. Now the second stitch, I'm going to put my needle into the stitch below, like that. And then as I slide it off onto the right hand needle, just pull the yarn, and you're unknitting the stitch and putting it back on the right hand needle. I'm going to do it again. So you put your needle into the stitch below, slide it on to the right needle, and then when I pull this yarn, there, you can see you've got 3 stitches now unknitted onto the right hand needle. Now look at our little purl stitch in the wrong place. There it is. So here I've got the wrong kind of stitch for stocking stitch. So I'm going to unknit this stitch by the same method. I'm going to look underneath, find the bottom under there, the bottom below stitch, slide it off, and then just pull the yarn out. So that's how you unknit or tink a stitch. Okay, I'm going to show you how to frog a whole row of knitting. Now frogging means ripping back your knitting, and because knitters have a great sense of humour, when we say rip it back, it sounds like rip it, frogs. So that's why it's called frogging. So have a look at this. Here's our piece of knitting, and I'm going to rip back a whole row. Now it seems a bit scary, but what we're going to do is take the needle out of the stitches. So I'm just very gently, and make sure you really take your time, take the stitches off the needle, and there you have a piece of knitting with no needle in it. I'm just going to pull the working yarn very gently to pull out the next row of stitches. You see, as I'm pulling them out, and I go slowly with this, unless you're pulling out lots of rows, take your time very gently because you don't want to pull out more than you want to. I'm going to actually use the needle pointing towards me, picking up these stitches so that the stitches don't twist, which will make it a lot easier when you come to knit the next row. If you find you have got a twisted stitch, you can just turn it round, but this makes it a lot easier. So there's the last little stitch. I'm just going to pull that out. Boom. There it goes. And pick it up. So I'm going to turn the knitting round. Let's have a look how they sit on this row. So these are all sitting perfectly straight. Can you see that these ones are slightly angled? So when I'm going to come to, this is a purl row, but I'm going to purl this one here. It's sitting on the wrong way on the needle. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take it off and then just sit it back on the right way. There we go. So I'm going to purl that one. And again, this one's perfectly okay, so I'm just going to purl that one. This one is twisted, so I'm just going to lift it up with my right hand needle and then turn it round so it's back on the right hand needle. All you would need to do now is just carry on working the rest of the row. Let's have a look at how to fix a dropped stitch. Now this happens to everybody. You could be talking, you can just not be looking at your knitting, you can suddenly realise you've dropped a stitch, and how do you fix it? The knitter's best friend is a crochet hook. So here is the problem. We've got our stitch down here and what looks like a ladder in your knitting. So these are the rows that we've dropped down. There's 1, 2, 3 rows. The stitch has dropped down 3 rows. So what we need to do is to, instead of frogging it all the way back to here, we're going to use our trusty crochet hook to pull the yarn back through this stitch to bring it right up to the top again. So I'm going to put my crochet hook through the stitch like that, and then using the little hook on the end, pull the first strand of the ladder through the stitch. So there it is, that's the first one. Now we've got 2 more rungs of this little ladder to fix, so I'm going to put my hook through with the hook, the actual hooky part facing down, hook up that little strand of the ladder underneath and pull it through again. So here it is. We've got our little stitch. It's a little bit twisty, but that's okay. I'm going to put my hook back in again through all the strands of that yarn. And now you can see we've only got 1 ladder to fix. So we're just going to use the hook of the crochet hook there, the little end, to hook round, and then I'm going to pull it through the stitch. I'm going to pop the stitch back onto the needle there, and you can see that that is fixed nicely on there, so you're able to now go and knit. There we go. I'm going to knit over it and carry on the row. Now I just want to show you another little extra tip. Sometimes when you're picking up stitches, or you frogged a row, or you tink back, stitches can get twisted, and so I just want to show you how to straighten those up. So here we have a stitch that's actually twisted on the needle. When you look at it, if you went to knit it through the front, this is how you can tell. If you want to knit it through its normal sort of front leg, that is crooked, it's sitting there, you're having to go back a long way to knit it, and that's because the stitch itself is twisted. So I'm going to pick it up onto the right hand needle and then just turn it round onto the stitch. Now you can see that when I'm going to knit it, the front leg of the stitch is leaning forwards, and that's what we want it to be. So if you find that you've got a twisted stitch, and I'll twist this one just to show you, you won't be able to knit very easily into the front of the stitch. So we just pick the stitch up, turn it round, and then you can knit into the first leg of the stitch in the right way. And that's how you untwist a stitch. Thanks for watching. I hope that's helped you with some of the easiest knitting mistakes to make and how to fix them. So if you feel like learning something new, like knitting in the round, click the next video and I'll see you there.